Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listener. It is Tuesday, July 21st, and I am out for a stroll on a cloudy day here in suburban Chicago. The construction site across the street from my house is hopping. My neighbors are out walking dogs and getting exercise, so I'm going to have to spend some energy just making sure I don't get too close to anybody else as it goes. So hopefully you enjoyed last week's episode, my top game from each of Nick Shaw's top 10 game mechanics categories. If you missed the episode, basically the way that works is that pal Nick Shaw, from whom I know from a number of different board game forums, also the co-designer of a number of solo modes and the co-designer of the game Welcome to Dino World, posted on Boardgamegeek, on the Boardgamegeek thread in the Blue Peg Pink Peg forum, a list of his top 10 game mechanisms and his favorite game for each. It occurred to me that it would be amusing to comment on that list, and here we are. This is part 2. If you go back one episode in this feed, you'll find part 1, in which I comment on games 2 or mechanics 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. This time I'll be commenting on mechanics 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Whew, that was a complicated explanation for a silly premise, but hopefully it's entertaining nonetheless. The one thing I did wrong last time was I forgot to bring along my list of what Nick actually said his favorite games were in each category, and I thought I probably ought to do that. So, as a sum up recap from last time, Nick's favorite auction/bidding game, mine was QE. He said his is Die Spiekerstadt, which is a well-known and famous auction bidding game. Also a favorite, I believe, of Rich Sommer, of the much-beloved and much-mourned podcast, whose name I can't remember right now. Something Cardboard. Not Heavy Cardboard, though. That's somebody else. Contract Fulfillment. Nick likes The Builders, Middle Ages. I believe I said Via Nebula. Card Drafting. He said Seven Wonders. I said Seven Wonders. We agree on that one, Nick. Dice Rolling. He says Nations, the dice game. That's a good one. Not as good as Escape, Curse of the Temple, I would say, but still good. And finally, he said Area Control Petrichor, which is always one I've loved. I love the art on the cover of Petrichor, but I've never sought it out to play it, so that's my bad. Okay, so here we are in part 2. So the next one is Action Q, and that's QUE, as in a line. So I presume that an Action Q game is one where you are planning out the things you're going to do before you actually do them, and then they sort of execute on their own. I'm not sure how that's different than a programming game, but in my head they sound the same, so I'm going to go with that. I haven't played very many games using this mechanism. Robo Rally is one I enjoyed a fair amount, but I did sell that off. It ended up not being a game that I could get to the table very often and took up a lot of room, so I don't have Robo Rally anymore. Let me think. Recently I've been playing Lovelace and Babbage, which has an action queue. It's a sort of speed programming mode, and then you walk through and see, did you actually do everything that you thought you did, and did you get there quicker than other people? I know that I have some more games in that ilk, but I'm having a lot of trouble thinking of them right now. London Dread is an interesting one. I think I'm going to say London Dread is my favorite of that kind of game, even though the ending of London Dread, the mechanism that they used for the finale of the battle was not good at all and kind of tanked the game. The gameplay itself, the planning and execution part is really interesting. It's got this like big clock and this board you're running around on, and you're trying to beat these challenges and work with your partners to make sure that you have enough resources in order to beat those challenges. It works really well, and the art is cool. The premise of the game is great. So yeah, London Dread by Grey Fox Games, I would say, is my favorite programming game or action queue game, but I feel like I'm missing some that I may have played. I may come back to this one if some bubble to the surface. Let's see, Nick says his favorite is Colt Express, which is a game, I know it won this, it was either nominated or won the Spiel des Jahres, and it is very popular, and is a game I would certainly enjoy trying sometime, but I have not had the opportunity. So that's one. That's why I can't speak to that one. All right, next up, pool building. Pool building. Nick says his favorite is Orleans, which is going to definitely be a contender for me. So thinking about pool building games, I think pool building is an umbrella description of a game where you are gathering resources and then you roll those resources and do something with them, or you randomize them in some way. In Orleans, you're drafting these chits that go into a bag, and you're going to draw some of them out of the bag, and you never know which ones you're going to get. Now, I actually do prefer Rainer Stockhausen's later take on this design, Altiplano, because in Altiplano, the biggest difference in the two is that in Altiplano, you empty your whole bag before you refill it, which means that you get to use every token you buy, and you have a little bit more control in planning what's going to happen. Whereas in Orleans, you're drawing randomly out of your bag each time, and any tokens you use go back in your bag. So you could buy, a monk, which is sort of the wild tokens, or a city administrator. I can't remember the names of the roles. You could buy one of these tokens and really need it to do something, and just never draw it. And that part's not great. So I guess of those two, Altiplano is my preferred game. But then there's also, let's see, what are some other pool building games I've played? There's, you might call Castle Dice a pool building game. And that one you're rolling dice and you get resources, but I'm trying to remember if you get the same dice. It's been years since I've played it. If you get the same dice every round, I think you do. The interesting thing there is when you roll the dice, then everybody shares in them. So you could roll a green die and have your opponent take it. But that's the pool building part you do. And then you share the results. Dice Settlers would be a good one. The David Turczi design, which plays pretty fast and has some interesting mechanisms, but a big part of it is pool building. Or let's see what else. There's the Quacks of Quedlinburg, which is another bag building game in which you're gathering things. And then I guess the big difference between like a pool building and a deck building game is that in a pool building game you're drawing from the whole, you're mixing around the whole group and drawing from them, whereas in deck building the deck is in order, I guess, having been shuffled. And again, you go through the whole thing. So probably in terms of randomization, Altiplano is closer to a deck building game than Orleans. Orleans and Quacks of Quedlinburg. Maybe that's the difference between the deck and the pool. Anyhow, I like that quite a bit. Let's see, do I like Orleans or Altiplano or Dice Settlers best? I'm going to say Altiplano. I know I've talked about it quite a bit lately. I played it again recently and really liked the interplay. As I'm evaluating that versus Orleans, the big difference for me comes down to, are you putting stuff out on the map, or are you putting stuff into your warehouse? And I find the warehouse puzzle just a little more interesting, I guess. I feel like in Orleans, you are more locked into a particular strategy. And maybe it's just because whenever I've won, I've always used this one, so maybe I'm not seeing it. But, in Orleans, you have to maximize your citizenry to get that score multiplier up. And all the other things pale in comparison in terms of importance. And so you're kind of stuck pursuing the same thing. I do like the difference in machines that you might get. That part's good. But ultimately, I think I like Altiplano better. I also like the theme in Altiplano better because there's llamas, or alpacas, I guess. But that's pool building. Definitely share a taste with Nick there. All right, trick taking. He says Pikoko is his favorite. I have not played Pikoko. I've played a lot of trick taking games in my day. Plenty of 500 and euchre, and I've played a little bit of bridge. Like literally 3 or 4 days of it. That's it. In terms of games that you might buy that are trick-taking games, haven't played a lot of them. I've played Vampire Queen, which got a bit of play for a little while in my family, and it was quite enjoyable. So I like that one a lot. So I have Spires, which is an interesting ladder climbing trick-taking game with some set collection elements. That's pretty good. But I haven't played a lot of trick-taking games, I guess. So I don't even know if I have enough of them to say I have a favorite, short of saying, frankly, 500. I've always thought 500 is a pretty great game. Having played bridge a little bit, I feel like 500... I like 500 better because the bidding system in bridge is so opaque, and I understand why people like it, but having played a lot of games, it feels strange to me to have a huge part of this game be this arcane secret language that you have to learn in order to play the game. There's all of these words that don't mean exactly what they seem to mean, and like a sort of bid that means something else, and a way to respond when somebody bids a particular thing. I just remember at one point there was a bid I was learning, and one person had bid one thing, and then I was supposed to say something else, which secretly means I have two cards in that suit. And it clearly means I have 2 cards in that suit or whatever. So why wouldn't I just say I have 2 cards in that suit? I don't know. I get it. And limited communication, and that's a huge part of the game. And there's tons to go on, tons to happen in bridge. And it certainly is an interesting game. But I found the level of opacity needed in order to understand the bidding exceeded for me the value of the bidding system, as opposed to 500 where you're just bidding suits and numbers, and there's some implications in when you bid something, but it's not outrageous. Maybe I'm just complaining for complaining's sake. So all that goes to say, I haven't played very many trick-taking games, I guess. I feel like I have, but none of them really stuck in my head strong enough to demand being a favorite. So to that end, and because I don't want to say 500, that's boring, I'm going to say Vampire Queen, which is a pretty fun ladder-style trick-taking game that has a significant element of trying to avoid taking particular tricks. It shares some DNA with something like Hearts. So, all right, but Pikoko, I will try if I get a chance. All right, tile placement. Nick Shaw says his favorite tile placement game is Castles of Burgundy. Now, Castles of Burgundy is one of those strange games that I've played quite a few times and I enjoy, but I have not played in person. I started playing it on, I think Boîte à Jeux is the main place that I play Castles of Burgundy, and I've played it a number of times there, like a dozen or more. So I've come to understand the game for the most part. I feel like there's some element of scoring that I don't really know, and I probably need to go read the rules more carefully now that I've played it a bunch. But yeah, I really like it, and I think it's a game I would enjoy on the tabletop. I've held off from buying it for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like mentally it's in a similar space to Carpe Diem, and I really, really like Carpe Diem, to the point that if I'm able to get my family to play a game like that, I'm going to have them play Carpe Diem. So having another game in that same mind space doesn't necessarily suit unless I'm going to be bringing it somewhere else to play. So right now, that doesn't fit as well. But I really like the mix of options about where you could score things and the wide variety of things you can take from a relatively simple set of mechanisms. So yeah, Castles of Burgundy is a top-notch tile-laying game. But what are some others that I might point to? There's Voluspa, which is an interesting, almost abstract game that involves tile-laying. Galaxy Trucker. Ooh, I like Galaxy Trucker a lot, and I think it's fair to call that a tile-laying game, combined with a sort of speed dexterity element. That's pretty great. I don't know if you would call the Castles of Mad King Ludwig a tile-laying game. You certainly are. I don't think so. I think it feels like a tile-laying game, at least on some level, requires the tiles to be somewhat uniform. And the whole point of Mad King Ludwig is the tiles are not uniform, and they're weird to put together. It's a building game, certainly, but I'm not sure I would call it a tile-laying game. I would, however, call Carpe Diem a tile-laying game. And that one you are drafting tiles and putting them on your board. Where you put them matters. The way that they relate to one another matters. The point system works. Yeah, so Carpe Diem certainly would be one. I'm not sure I can think of any others offhand. In which case, Carpe Diem has got to win it for me. Now, why do I like that more than Castles of Burgundy? I think part of it is the dice. I've had too many games of Castles of Burgundy where I've got a kind of strategy I'm going for, and I just don't get the dice I need. And the game does have some dice mitigation, but not enough for the level of strategy that it encourages. I get that that's part of the tactical nature of that kind of game, and you could argue perhaps that Carpe Diem has a similar issue, in that if you're building a strategy and then the new tiles come out and you don't have easy access to the tile you need, well, too bad for you. But I feel it doesn't feel as bad as really needing to put a tile on a 3 and I roll a 1 and a 6. Then I can either use 2 workers to change one of those dice, or I have to then pursue something totally different, which may or may not work depending what other people have played. So I guess from that perspective, I find Carpe Diem just a little more satisfying to play. But they're both excellent games. So I nod to your choice, Nick, but I say Carpe Diem's better. Finally, worker placement. Nick says Stone Age, which is a game I still haven't played. I hear many, many good things about it. It makes top 10 lists constantly for worker placement. So there's certainly no shortage of love for that game, but I just haven't gotten around to playing it. That said, I really do like a good worker placement game, and I have several of them in my collection. The difficulty here is choosing. I have Agricola, which I've mentioned. I really like playing asynchronously, so you have time to ponder your moves carefully, although sometimes I forget my strategy then and screw things up. Anachrony I've mentioned a number of times as being among my favorite worker placement games, both for theme and for the level of engine building and complexity that it encourages. There's also Lords of Waterdeep, which I talked about in the last episode in regard to contract fulfillment. I had one more on the top of my head. Worker play. Other Uwe Rosenberg games. Reykholt and A Feast for Odin are both also really interesting worker placement games. I also like Raiders of the North Sea. That's a good one. And the Manhattan Project is really interesting as well. All of those All of those are great. Turns out I really like worker placement games. I knew that already. As I think about it, though, it really comes down to Agricola or Anachrony. And it's got to be Anachrony. I'm sorry, I'm predictable. Anachrony is so delightfully deep in its mechanisms, so thematically rich in both the way that the mechanisms connect to the gameplay and the way that it feels on the table, the story that emerges as you're playing things. I know that's one of the things people really enjoy about Stone Age, so I can see why that is a game that made the top of Nick's list. You know, the only downside to Anachrony is it's so complicated. It is not a game that's easily introduced to other people, and that would be the thing that would swing me more toward Agricola or even something lighter like Reykholt, which I really enjoyed as well. So that's the end of my top 10 games of Nick Shaw's top 10 game mechanism list from Boardgamegeek. So, dear listener, what are your top 10 games from these categories? Which games did I miss considering? Which game do you think I would have put on there if I'd thought of it? Pop over to Boardgamegeek Guild 3269 and tell me your ideas on these issues, and then I'll be able to know what you're thinking. You can also reach out to me over at Rattlebox Games. Brendan at Rattlebox Games is my email address. Or we have Twitter, also Rattlebox Games, which we don't really check very often, but say hi. Or the best place is the Board Game Geek Guild, number 3269. Thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.